I was born here. I feel very belong to this place, to this country. Especially I feel attached to the language, to Hebrew, and to the history of the country. It's not a question for me. I don't think it's the best place in the world or something, but I really feel that it's my place. We lived for, I think, from 95 till 3 years ago. We lived in rented apartments all over this area. And then 3 years ago we bought this apartment, which I love. First of all, it's really wonderful to have a place of your own, because we moved so many apartments, because each time we had to move because the contract was finished, and I like, and I looked for this kind of building, which is buildings from the 30s, which are almost ruined, in very bad condition. But I like the high ceilings, and it's a Bauhaus building, which were very common in the 30s to build this style of architecture. I like this as all I put here on my books, and when I feel sad, I think, okay. When I feel that I didn't do anything in life, so I think, okay, I did this at least. I have this. So this is my old box of really old stuff when I just started doing comics. It was 1990. I was still a student in the art academy, and actually I think this is my first comic strip. It was 90, but here it was like the 80s. In Israel everything is 10 years late. My main influence was Raw magazine and alternative American comics. So, and it was very dark and very twisted and grotesque, and I think it fitted also my personality at the time. I was young and miserable. Not especially miserable, just miserable like any teenager or 20 years old. These years, a specific artist that I fell in love with his work, like Mark Bayer here, and then suddenly it was Edward Gorey that I fell in love with his style. So I was very influenced by his stories, kind of stories, and style of very delicate line and all this etching. This was after I finished the academy already, and I had this column. And each week was a different subject, and I had a lot. Really, I had fun because I had so much freedom in the newspaper to do. It was very good time for illustrators, and because there was journalism was flourishing, and there were so many new magazines and newspapers. And then I started working with Gal Keret. He's a very famous Israeli author, short stories. He wasn't famous at the time. I wanted to start making longer stories and not just these funny strips. But I still didn't have confidence in my ability to write longer stories. And I liked his stories, so I called him, and then we made a book. So you can see when I made this cover, I was in love with Lustal, with Jacques Lustal. This is a collection actually of not all the stories, but some of the stories that we did for the newspaper. And I was really excited. It was published in '96, and I think it was the first Israeli graphic novel. After I worked for several years with a couple of years with Etgar, and then we established Actus Tragicus. It was a group of artists that we decided we want to publish books, and there was no publishers for comics in Israel, so we decided that we will publish it ourselves. We were 5 artists, and each year we published books. For me, it was for years time to develop very slowly the style of writing, and I think the style of writing or the story that I wrote, this was what influenced the style of drawing. The stories became more and more realistic. I see it as the development of me as a writer, but also as a person. That I grew up, some bad thing happened to me, like everybody in life. Not everything is good, and I discovered that life are grotesque and extreme, not less than the imagination, and that I don't need to be so extreme. And also I think I began to like other people more. We did this book in 2002. I think this is what I wanted to show here, because this story had the homecoming. It was the first time for me to understand that I succeeded to use the Israeli reality in my stories, because my stories are not political or not directly political. I'm not interested in comic journalism. Not that I don't like it, I just don't feel comfortable doing it myself. I just read this article in the newspaper. It was a time there were many terror attacks in the city, and I read this article about that was something that really happened the day before that. It was a plane came from Lebanon, a small plane, and the pilot didn't identify himself. So they didn't know, they thought it was maybe a terrorist. So the Air Force just bombed the plane, and it fell. And the pilot fell without his head on the table of a high school teacher in the school, in a high school near the beach. And what I thought was, this sounds exactly like the stories that I used to write. It's grotesque, and suddenly I felt that I could take it and make it into a story, but because it was so extreme, what I made, this was a story of the homecoming, the combination of personal and national. It's just it's something that we are mixing. Our life, our personal life, are mixed in this situation. It's not like compared to an opinion that you stand from the outside and you say what you think about it, but it's not my experience about it that we are. It's something that we cannot separate from our life. stories taking place in are very important. Like the location is another character. My stories are a lot about how in the individual relationship with the outer world around, the surrounding, his family, but also his place of birth, his country. Also, I like to draw buildings. I like to draw architecture. I like to draw many details, and I want everything to be very accurate because I feel that everything is part of the character of the location. Even the size of windows, and the handles of doors, and what kind of trees. After my short story, Homecoming, The Homecoming, was published in an anthology by Actus. A few months afterwards, I got an email from Chris Oliveros. He's the publisher and the owner of the publishing house Drawing Quarterly. It's a Canadian publishing house for comics, for alternative comics, a very good one. Actually, it was my favorite publishing house in the world. And he said that he liked the story, and do I want to write a full, long graphic novel for them. I always wrote short story because this is what I was able to publish. So it was a completely new experience to try and write a long novel. My main influence for the story was a documentary film that I saw, a wonderful documentary called Number 17. The documentary was about a terror attack in a bus. 17 people were killed in this. One of the bodies were ruined in a way that nobody could identify it, but it wasn't the only problem. The problem was nobody came to claim for the body. I found it very interesting that we want to think that if we disappear, someone will look for us. Somebody will miss us, and it was very sad that somebody is missing and nobody cared. Both in exit wounds and in the property. Cemetery is one of the important locations. Theme of death and is also something that I deal with it a lot in my books. It's a part of life. For me, it's really part of life. And in life, I found that nothing is completely sad or completely funny. And also in death, and even part of ceremonies, and I don't know, always something that's also grotesque or funny, and it's something that connected. It's not you cannot separate it. Here is these two drawers. I have all the material of the property. The process of the writing is the first thing, and it took me, I think, about 1.5 years to write the script. Only then I make a storyboard. I know exactly what. Then I imagine what I'm going to draw. It's very important because in comics each frame is different. It means something. If the frame is big or wide or very narrow, it means something in the rhythm of the story. It means this is the skeleton of the whole. Here I have all the shooting of the actors that I'm using, because but I have to tell, this is the first time that I used real actors for a project. I have the storyboard, and I tell them what is the line, but also what is the feeling that I want to have from them. What is the subtext actually? I work with transparent layers, and I use I work on the photos, but I don't copy it one to one, because if you're just copying it, first of all, the perspective is very distorted, and also it will be too realistic. The characters will be very boring. I don't want the colors to be completely flat. So what I'm trying to create is a personal something it will be it has some random aspect in it, mistakes. That it won't be just I won't know exactly what's going to happen. This is Yaakov Garden, and I used to come here a lot when I was a child, because my grandmother, she used to live just nearby. My father grew up here after they came from Poland. The family of my father, they came from Poland in 1940, already after the German occupation. And they left all their property there, and also the rest of the family that was killed in the war. And my grandmother never spoke about Poland. It was never mentioned in our house. They didn't speak Polish. My grandmother didn't want to go again for a visit. And I wasn't interested in Poland all my life. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't consider it my roots or origin. I was an Israeli. And suddenly, I had this, it was in the middle of the night. I woke up in the middle of the night, and so there was this sentence in my head to write a story about a young woman who's going with her grandmother to Poland to look for the family property.